It's good to see you. It's good to be with you this morning. And I was doing fine until Frank was sitting next to me during worship, and he leans over to me and goes, "Oh, I didn't realize Shan was here this morning." He goes, "So good luck, no pressure, right?" Thanks, Frank. Appreciate that. So, no, I'm excited to have the privilege and the opportunity to share with you this morning. And I trust that God will use me. And as we hear His word, my prayer is that our faith is increased this morning. That my faith is increased, but also that your faith is increased this morning. Our text this morning will be Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 7. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 7. I'll give you a moment to turn there. And while you're doing that, I've got a confession to make. So yesterday I was at Lowe's having to pick up some supplies. I was working on a project at my house, and my wife was with me, and we're checking out, and right at the checkout they had these glasses here. I guess they're called readers. And I'm in a new season of my life, okay? But I was looking at them, I'm like, do these things really work? And Claudette, just kind of looks at me, and of course I'm like, well, I got to try it. So I take one of these readers and I put it on, and then I look at something close. I'm like, holy cow, I can see, right? I'm like, things aren't blurry. I was like, these things work, and so I bought some. They work, okay? That's the good news. The bad news is I forgot to bring them this morning. So you may see me doing this with my Bible, okay? I hope it's not a distraction. But I'm in this season of life that things that used to be clear here, right, it's like, oh, this is a little blurry. I got to bring it out here, okay? So anyways, that's the confession. That's where I'm at. It's a new season of my life. I'm dealing with it, okay? Hopefully it's not a distraction for you this morning. All right, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. I think we'll have it up here on the big screen as well for you to follow along. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. This is Jesus speaking. This is the conclusion of his famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And this sermon starts back in chapter 5. You can find it through chapters 5 through 7. It's just 111 verses. It starts with the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then he goes through and has 8 more Beatitudes. I like to think of those as an announcement, right? And then he goes into talking about being the salt and the light. And he continues on and says that he didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them. And then he goes on to teach some really radical new things, at least in that day. In his sermon, he goes, "You have heard it said, but I say." And he introduces some new ideas, some new commands on the Sermon on the Mount. And then he ends his Sermon on the Mount with 3 consecutive metaphors. He talks about 2 gates. One gate is wide and the path is easy, but it leads to destruction. And there's a narrow gate and the path is hard, but it leads to life. And then he talks about 2 trees. There's a healthy tree, and a healthy tree bears good fruit. And because it's healthy, it cannot bear bad fruit, but there's a diseased tree, and it bears bad fruit. And he goes on to say, he goes, any tree that bears bad fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. And then he ends with the metaphor with 2 houses. And one house is built on the rock. It's a firm foundation. And so when the rain falls and the flood waters rise and the wind is blowing and it's beating on that house, it's able to stand. And it's contrasted with a house that is built on sand. It's not a firm foundation. It can shift, it can move. And that house that is built on sand, it's the same storm that's coming. It's the rain comes. The floodwaters rise. The wind starts to blow and it starts to beat on that house as well. And it falls. And Jesus says, great is the fall. Metaphors are important. Right? They helped us connect concepts and ideas in a meaningful way. Sometimes big ideas or new ideas, they can be abstract. They can be hard to grasp. But using metaphors, it can help connect us. And I mean, we can understand it. We can relate to it. It sparks the imagination. Right? We can begin to imagine. And when the imagination is sparked, right, it's easier. It tends for us to, hey, we can then work that into our lives. And so Jesus uses metaphors quite a bit. In fact, in the Bible, we find metaphors all throughout it. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew prophets used metaphors. In the New Testament, you find metaphors. And Jesus was a master at this. He used storytelling and parables and metaphors, not just on this occasion, but especially when he talked about himself. He said things like, I am bread, life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd, the true vine. These are things that Jesus says about himself, and they're metaphors. They help spark the imagination. And Jesus is a master at using these, and I think that's what he's doing here. There's a reason he gives this great sermon, this great message. And he wants the audience to understand the significance of what he is saying. He doesn't want it to just be some abstract idea, theoretical. No, there's significance to it. And so he uses a metaphor. I often think, who is the audience? Right? Well, it tells us in verse 24, everyone then who hears these words. And so certainly, if you look back in chapter 5, you had the disciples that were present, but you also had the crowds that had gathered. But when he says this, it's not just for the disciples, it's just not for the crowds of that day, it's everyone who hears these words. It's for me. It's for you. Now, what's interesting is the location of the Sermon of the Mount provides a natural understanding of this metaphor that Jesus is using. All right, so the Sermon of the Mount is close to the Sea of Galilee, and you would have had the Sea of Galilee in the backdrop. And I think I have a picture. Here it is. And in today's times, if you go there, that's actually called the Mount of the Beatitudes, right, where he made that announcement, right? And they have a chapel there that you can go, and they believe this is the spot where Jesus gave this famous sermon. They call it the Mount of the Sermon. It's more like a big hill, right? But what a beautiful backdrop. You have the Sea of Galilee behind you, and Jesus is giving this sermon. And the audience in that day would have really understood this metaphor that's Jesus using, because in this area, around the Sea of Galilee, you have the Jordan River that fed into it. You have this thing called alluvium sand. All right, and basically what that is, it's the mixture of clay and rocks and gravel and minerals, and you find it near rivers and deltas and like floodplains, all right? And it's this sand, right, alluvial sand. But the thing with it is, in the summer months, when it's hot and dry, this sand can really get hard and hardened to be a solid, firm structure, or it appeared to be, right? And so you had this all throughout the region, this alluvial sand. All right, and it would be tempting as you're building up, and all along the Sea of Galilee, you had small villages and small towns, right, fishing towns. All right, and so it would have been tempting for a builder to just come along and especially in the summer months or when it was dry, to walk on this alluvial sand and think, hey, this is solid enough, this is firm, this is hard enough. Let's start building here, right? But the problem is it would only last for a season, because in the winter months, and you had the rains, right, come, and if it flooded the Jordan River, then all of a sudden you'd have water surrounding the area and this alluvial sand, which would be hard and dry and seem like it would be solid. The moment that rain came or the floodwaters rise and ran into that, came in contact with that, all of a sudden what appeared to be a solid surface would no longer be solid. right? Melt away. And all of a sudden it could shift, and that was the sand. And archaeologists have discovered that around this region, you've had builders, they would dig up to 10 feet to get past that alluvial sand to get to bedrock. And so the audience in that day, when Jesus is telling them this metaphor, it's like a man who built a house on a rock, right? A solid rock. Immediately, I think their mind or their picture would have gone to this picture and they would understand, well, yeah, that makes sense. Because if you don't dig past that alluvial sand, right, that structure that you're building may be good for a while, for a season, right? But the moment when winter comes, right, or the rains come and it starts to flood with the Jordan River and that water comes up, it's no longer standing, right? And Jesus says, oh, well, then that builder, if he didn't take the time to dig down to that bedrock and really work at that, it's just a foolish builder. And so that audience, man, the picture that was painted for them, they would understand, yeah, it's pretty serious, right? There's a significance. We understand, man, you need a firm foundation if you're going to build a house. And listen, in our modern day, we understand that as well. I mean, all you have to do is drive around and go to any construction site where they're building a house or any kind of building. They're not just putting it on the dirt or the sand, because it won't last. And here, this was new for me. I moved here in 2015. Here they can come and kind of flatten the surface and then just put a concrete foundation on there, and it'll work, right? I came from Wisconsin. You got to dig below the frost line, 6 feet, right? You have a basement that they got to dig down, right, to go, right? But we understand this. When we're building a house, when we're building a structure, man, it is important that you have a firm foundation for that structure to stand on. We understand this, and certainly when Jesus is given this sermon and then he uses that metaphor, his audience back in that day would have understood this as well. But remember, this is a metaphor. So we're not just talking about building a house and making sure a house is on a firm foundation when the storms come. And so what can this house represent? I think it represents our life. Because if you look back in chapters 5 through 7, when Jesus is preaching his Sermon on the Mount, he's preaching about how to live life, how to conduct yourself, how to go about in this lifetime and live your life. And he's saying, hey, I want you to do this and act this way and this way and this way. And he says some radical things, right? So they've heard that, hey, okay, don't commit murder. Okay, got that. But then he kind of raises the bar and says, no, hey, listen, even if you are angry with your brother, you've committed this. And so he really has these challenging things for the audience back then, for his disciples, for the crowds. But it's for me and it's for you because it's everyone who hears these words. And think about it. Everyone, we're building a life. I mean, even at a younger age, now some of the younger students, you're thinking, yeah, what a life I have. My parents make me do this. Yes, yes. But as you get older, right, you have choices to make. Am I going to continue in school? That's part of building your life and making a decision. I'm going to go to this school. I'm not going to go to school. I'm going to go to a trade school. I'm going to go right into the business world. We continue to build our life with relationships, right? Who am I going to hang out with? Who are my friends, right? Who am I going to marry, right? In business, we're building a life, right? What business decisions are we going to make? How are we going to conduct our business? All these things when we're building a life, and Jesus is going, man, it has to be built on a firm foundation. Build your life on a firm foundation, because if you don't, well, listen, the rain's going to come. The floodwaters, they're going to rise. The wind is going to blow. And it's going to blow so hard it's going to beat on the house. And so we can look at it and say, well, what's the storms represent? Well, that could represent the hardships in life, right? The difficulties, the challenges. Because think about it, if you're building a house, right, and you have rain and you have floodwaters and you have this storm, right? The wind, those can be destructive to the house. Well, we can naturally assume and go, yeah, when he's talking about the rain and all that, it's the hardships that we're going to face in life. So as we're building a life, if we don't have a firm foundation to stand on, all of a sudden we're going to experience something that is difficult, right? Then, man, it could knock us over. Could wipe us out, take us right out. And I think if you've been living this life long enough, we recognize that, right? Hardships are going to come. Difficulties are going to come. I'm reminded of this story with my two oldest boys, Taylor and Max. Max is smiling at me. Okay, but yesterday in the car I said, Max, I'm going to tell this story. And then my wife looked at me and said, no, you need to ask him if you can tell the story. So I said, okay, Max, can I tell this story? Yeah. Okay, good. So I have permission to tell the story. But I'm reminded of a story of Max and Taylor. This was years ago because they're learning to ride their bikes. And Max and Taylor, they're about a year apart. Both of them in college now, but they were about a year apart. So growing up, they did almost everything together. Right, playing together, everything together. And so when they're riding bikes, I don't remember the exact age, but it was where they're just learning out. You know, it's like you're teaching them to ride a bike, but they're still kind of wobbly, right? They're still trying to figure out, okay, how fast or how slow do I have to go when I'm making my turns, right? And they're still at this stage where it's hard when you first get on the bike and you put your foot up, you know, and you're trying to use those leg muscles to get it started, right? And so sometimes it's better if you get on a hill because it can kind of help assist you, right, to get the momentum that you need to get that balance, right? And so we're up in Wisconsin. We live on a corner lot. And so we have a street going this way to our right and then a street in front of us. And because we're in the city, we have sidewalks. And so it naturally just makes an L shape. And as I'm looking out my house, if this was my front door, on the front I would have a sidewalk going this way and a sidewalk coming this way on the corner with streets. But on the left side here was a hill that kind of went up 3 or 4 5 houses this way, and it made a hill. And so what my two boys like to do is they would take their bikes and walk it up to this hill and get started, and they'd be on the sidewalk, and they'd ride it down, and then they would try to navigate and figure out, okay, how fast can I go to try to make this turn right on the sidewalk to go? And it was a blast, and I was sitting on the porch just watching them do this, and they would just do this time after time. They'd go walk up, and Max would come down and work away, and they'd figure out, okay, when I got to slow it down or go faster. And they would work up, their confidence where they would start going faster and faster and not using their brake and then figuring out, I can lean into this thing and make that turn, right? So this afternoon, they're doing this, and Max had just gone down the hill. I'm sitting here watching them, and Max had just gone down the hill, made the turn, and then he turns around and comes back and stops right in front of where I am. He's still in the middle of the sidewalk, but he stops and he looks over to me, and he's yelling to get my attention. Like, look, Dad. He should have said, behold, right? But he didn't, okay? Behold, Dad. He didn't. He said, but he's getting my attention because he wanted me to see, hey, Dad, did you just see what I did? I think it's because he probably went a little bit faster and made that turn, right? And I'm looking at him going, yeah. And right at that moment, I hear Taylor. He's at the top of the hill, and he just yells as loud as he can, get out of the way, Max, I'm coming. But he didn't wait for Max to get out of the way. He starts coming. Not my best parenting, all right? So this isn't parenting advice. Well, I just sit and watch, okay? Like, let's see how this plays out, right? And here, Taylor is coming, and he's closing in fast. And then I look over, and I look at Max, and I see Max that was looking at me, all of a sudden looks up, and he realized, oh, a storm is coming. All right? And you can kind of see, parents, you know what I'm talking about with your children. If you see a panic on their face, or you can see that they're thinking, right? The wheels are turning, right? And that's the look that I saw on Max, because he's looking up, he's going, what do I do? And I see him try to put his foot up, and he's trying to start to move, and he can't get it started, right? He's not strong enough to get that started to get the bike out of the way, okay? And I'm thinking, well, son, move to the next option, right? And so he does. He moves to the next option. Now, the next option for him was not to get off the bike and just leave. The next option was he put both of his feet down, and then he takes whatever the bar comes here, tries to grab it, and he's trying to pick up to move the bike, right, to go out of the way. he ain't strong enough to do that either, right? So he's picking up and he's realizing, I'm not going anywhere with this thing, right? And I'm watching him, and then I'm looking, I'm seeing Taylor's right here, right? And then I'm looking, and then finally Max realizes, he looks up and realizes, okay, it's about to go down, okay? I should have helped. Okay, I realize that now, but I was frozen, all right? I was looking at this going, this is really happening. And I'm watching this, and I'm going, And in my mind, I'm thinking, maybe this is a good life lesson that they'll just have to learn, all right? But I just watched this play out, and all of a sudden, Max realizes, hey, it's about to happen. He takes both of his feet, plants them firmly on the concrete, right? Grabs a hold of his front of his, I've got to set this down, okay? I remember this part like it was yesterday. Grabs a part of his handle, sticks out his fist straight like this. I mean, just straight out, and yells to the top of his lungs, ah! And I'm back just going, that's not the choice I would have picked. And I see then Taylor's coming, move, move, and then boom, bike's flying, and here Max is standing still, and I'm going, Then I got up, and I went to help them, and listen, they're both okay, all right? They're in college now, so they didn't get seriously hurt. But I tell you that story because even at a young age, my son Max figured out, hey, this is the time, it's too late for me to flee, right? And the storm's coming. I need a firm foundation to stand on if I'm going to withstand what is about to happen to me. And he did. He planted his feet down on that concrete and said, here it is, right? And even at a young age, he understood the importance of having a firm foundation if something bad is coming your way, right? Now, I purposely shared that story because I wanted it to be lighthearted this morning. But certainly when we go through life and we're building our life, we're going to face some real challenges, some real hardships, some real difficulties. We're going to face them. And if I had time, and maybe I will throughout the years, to sit down and have conversations with you, you could tell me some real hardships that you've had to face. Maybe directly to you, or maybe with people that you love dearly that they've had to face. And I could tell you some hardships that I've had to face. And I can look back and I can tell you, man, if I did not have a firm foundation, I don't think I would have been able to make it through. And maybe you could say the same thing. Or maybe now, I don't know your circumstances. Maybe you are facing some hardships, some difficulties, some challenges. It's raining. Maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's just you're in an all-out storm. I need a firm foundation to stand on. I want to ask this question. What is the rock in this passage that we just read? It's a firm foundation. Yes, it's a firm foundation. But specifically in this passage that we just read, what is the rock? I've asked this question hundreds of times to students over the years. Hundreds of times. To go, okay, hey, what's the rock? What's the firm foundation that you need to stand on? Sometimes I get, I don't know, okay, reread. But a lot of the times, the answer is Jesus. The answer is Jesus. And if I ask you that question and your answer is Jesus, here's what I would say to you and here's what I would say to them. That's only halfway right. Maybe you get partial credit for that. Because if we read verse 24, and everyone then who hears these words of mine, this is key, and does them. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Verse 26, and everyone who hears these words and does not do them is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. In this metaphor, Jesus is telling us, hey, the rock, the firm foundation, is not just hearing, it's doing. It's not enough for me to come here on a Sunday morning and to listen to Pastor Shan. To come here on a Sunday night, on a Wednesday night. I'm here a lot. I wouldn't change it for the world. But that's not enough for me to just come and listen and hear. Even if I sat down, it's the new year, and maybe you have a plan to go, I'm going to read through the Bible this new year, and I'm going to do this. All good things. All good things, right? But it's not enough to just read through and just hear it and go, okay, amen. It's not enough. We're deceiving ourselves. And Jesus is very clear. This is not my words. This is Jesus saying, and everyone who hears my words and does them. So if we're going to go through life and we want to have a firm foundation, it's not enough to just come on a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, a Wednesday, to go through the motions. It's not enough to just open the Bible and just read it and go, okay, that's good. We've got to be doers. There's got to be some action to it. Right? It's not enough to just listen and go, amen, amen, okay, and that's good. At some point, our faith has to have some action, and we got to go, no, if I really believe Jesus, then it's no longer I'm just going to hear what he has to say, but I'm going to have some follow through. And I'm really going to say, Jesus, no, you are Lord of my life. And so when you say these difficult things, it's hard, but if I really believe in you, Jesus, I'm going to take a step forward and try to obey. In our vision night here for EBC, Pastor Shan just simply said, hey, the vision that I have for 2024 for the church as a body is simple obedience. Amen. That's the firm foundation. For me, for our leadership team here, if you're in a leadership role, if you're not, for the body, simple obedience. And it's not because that's what Pastor Shan is trying to demand. It's not what I'm trying to demand or anyone. It's what Jesus says here. Anyone then who hears my words and does them is like a wise man, builds his house on the rock. I want to build my life on a firm foundation. I want you to build your life on a firm foundation. Now, here's what's interesting. This isn't a judgment from Jesus saying, hey, if you don't obey me, storms are going to come your way. That's not what Jesus is saying here. Because listen, the storm's coming whether you build your house on the rock or if you build it on the sand. So it's not Jesus threatening, right? Or trying to bring a judgment to you going, hey, if you don't obey what I say, well, then this bad stuff's going to happen to you. No, he's saying, here's the reality. We live in a broken world. Sin has entered, and storms are coming your way in this life. That's the reality. I don't have to like it, but it's true. It's true for me. It's true for you. And so Jesus isn't telling his audience, hey, if you don't obey me, then this is going to happen. No, he's going to say, this is going to happen. I'm offering you a way to stand firm. And the way for you to stand firm is to not just hear what I say, but let's have some action to it. That's how you stand firm. That's the way that I'm offering you. So I don't think of following Jesus as just, oh, I got to follow these set of rules, and I got to obey this, and I have to do this, and it's a burden. No, I look at it and go, man, it's a firm foundation for me to stand on because I know that difficult times will come. And I don't have to do this on my own. It's not by my strength. It's not by my words that is the rock. It's Jesus Christ. He's the rock. And I don't have to have that pressure to go, I have to have all the answers. No, Jesus is the firm foundation. It's his words. And he's offering a way for Michael, I want you to stand when it gets difficult. Stand on the firm foundation. Now, I think there's a bigger picture of what's happening here, though. If we just think we can limit, in this metaphor, the storms, the rain, and the floodwaters rising, and the wind blowing, beating on the house, if we think we can just limit it to the difficulties, to the challenges that we face in this lifetime, I think we're missing the bigger picture. Jesus did not come on this earth to just go, hey, Michael, I'll give you a better way, a rock here in this life to face your challenges. You think back in the beginning of Matthew, right? We're told that the angel comes to Joseph and he says, Mary's with child, and you're going to call him Jesus because he will save his people from the sins. Jesus' mission was not just to come and help you or help me to just stand firm on the storms that we'll face in this lifetime. His mission is to save us for eternity. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate to think, well, the final storm that I will face and that you will face, this final act of destruction, will be death. And if we are yoked with Jesus, if we believe in Jesus, if we believe his words when he hung on the cross and he said, it is finished, then we will stand with him for eternity. It's not because of the works that we've done, it's because of what Jesus has done. But when that ultimate storm comes, destruction comes, we stand firm from eternity. But if we don't believe what Jesus has to say, if we don't act in faith, and we're not yoked with Jesus, we don't believe he's our Lord and Savior, man, we can build our life on anything and everything, money. And listen, if you've got money, it can take you so far, and you may have a pretty well solid life with money, but it won't get you to eternity. The moment that final storm comes through death, money won't get you anywhere. It's sand. Maybe you put it on relationships. And I'm all for relationships. I believe in having a solid family relationships and a wife, and they can get you so far, and good friends in life can get you so far. Can't get you to eternity with God. It's sand. But if we yoke ourselves with Jesus, he's our rock. His words, it's what he has done, it's what he has said. We'll stand for eternity. You'll stand for eternity with him. And the person that has built their life on anything else, hearing his word but not doing it, anything else besides being obedient to Jesus, his life, his house, the thing that he's built will fall. And Jesus is very clear, and great is the fall of it. It's everlasting. It's eternal. That's the significance of this, his word. James tells us, he says, hey, don't just be hearers, but be doers of the word, right? It's like if we're just hearers, it's like a person who looks at a mirror and they're staring intently at their face, but the moment they walk away, they forget what they look like. It's temporary. If our firm foundation is not on Jesus Christ, His words, all of it is temporary. It may last for a season, and your season may be a couple of years, maybe your life, yes, but it's temporary. Amen. I want to invite the worship team up. And the worship team's going to come up and they'll play a song, and I want to have a time of response. I want you to ask yourself that question: what is the rock in your life? Firm foundation. Are you just coming here on a Sunday morning to just hear Jesus? It's not my words. It's Jesus saying that's not enough to just be a hearer. And so maybe this moment, if you have an opportunity, you're like, no, I have been. I'm just hearing. I have not been doing. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to come up. I want to pray with you. Maybe you realize and you're like, no, I need to be a doer. I want to give my life to Jesus. Jesus is my Lord. I want to celebrate that decision with you this morning. Maybe you're just going through a difficult time. It's a storm. I want to pray with you. And so as they sing this song, I just invite you to come if you need.